Hi everybody, it's Mark, the Family Woodworker. Hey, this Christmas my wife got me this drill press mortising attachment from Vevor. I mean, she knew what to order because I sent her the link. I also think if you have a drill press and some sharp chisels, the tool might be a little bit more trouble than it's worth, but let's find out. We'll do an unboxing and we'll run some first tests. I remember that my dad had some sort of mortising kit many years ago, but when he passed away and we cleaned out the house, I never found all of those parts. I still have his OG drill press though, and thanks to Christmas and my wife asking if I wanted anything, I sent her the link to this tool. She gets extra credit for then not asking me,
"What's this weird thing for?"
The kit comes with all the bolts you'll need to mount the base the wrong way, but more on that later. The cast iron upper mount is pretty beefy and should slip over the drill press collar or quill. That's the fixed part of the spindle that doesn't rotate when you turn the drill press on. This will clamp up on that quill and allow you to press the chisel attachment down into the wood, while the drill part helps clear out the material. That'll all make more sense as we get those parts set up for the test. Two more cast iron pieces are for the attachment to the drill press table, and they'll help hold down the wood stock as you cut the mortises in. This black plastic fence will act as the backstop for any wood piece that you slide along to expand that mortise cut. I like the 4 different chisel sizes you get, ranging in size from 1/4 inch to 5/8 of an inch, and the chisel points on the business end of the bit are extremely sharp. So I'll probably want to keep those plastic tips on just to protect them from damage. You can see how the chisel assembly fits into the upper part of the drill press collar here. This is a universal kit with smaller quill adapters that you can insert into the collar and fit most smaller drill press sizes. But without adding those adapters, the collar should fit up to a 2.56 inch quill size, which is what I have. The provided assembly instructions are just okay, but the picture is a better teacher on how the pieces of the tool should actually fit together. Where have I heard that before? I started with trying to attach the upper chisel holder to my drill press, but it did not fit. I noticed that the paint on the inside of the collar was pretty thick and rough, but we're just talking about paint, so I didn't expect that to be a problem. I know that tool accessories right out of the box should fit perfectly, right? I thought I might be able to sand off that paint and give it another try, but then I'd be eliminating my chance to return the tool if that didn't work. I checked the diameter of my drill press mount point one more time, and it was actually 2.56 inches, so this is supposed to be the right tool. You know me, off to the sander I went. I removed a little more than the paint and then rounded out the inside of the collar as best I could. Eventually I got the chisel holder on and bolted in place, with a quick test of the chisel also installed. The instructions then suggest mounting the table assembly through a piece of plywood and then bolted down to the drill press table. Looking at those bolt hole locations on the fence and then on the table, it looked like that assembly would not allow me to adjust the fence position front and back. There would be no way that the fence would slide front to back to accommodate different widths of lumber for a centered mortise. Instead, I chose to mount the fence and cast iron hold-down brackets to a piece of plywood and then create holes in the plywood front to back so that I could bolt the plywood to the vertical slots on the drill press table. This should allow me to slide the plywood and fence assembly back and forward to work with any thickness of stock I'd put on the table. Those provided black bolts were countersunk into the plywood bottom so that it would sit flat, and then I could fix the position of the fence on the plywood. Additional bolts were then mounted to the drill press cast iron table through the plywood front to back. This little adjustment solution seemed to work out pretty well. With the table mount solution figured out, we should get on with the rest of the assembly and testing.
Yes, get over there!
Now that the fence assembly was bolted up to the plywood and the plywood was bolted to the table, the remaining cast iron hold-down brackets fit into a slider bar that inserts into the backside of the fence bracket. The tool comes with some hand tightening knobs that'll make it easy for adjustments for that hold-down bracket up and down. The slider feature then accommodates different thicknesses of wood held down on the table. There are also some steel J-hooks that insert into the front of the fence that will grip whatever piece of wood you have against the fence, holding it in place. The combination of the hold-down bracket and the J-hooks seem to lock in the wood pretty well. There is one more challenge to overcome with this tool, regardless of the brand, and that is the squaring up of the chisel against the wood that sits against the fence. The chisel bit rotates in the upper bracket, leaving it up to you to align the sides of the bit squarely to the wood you want to cut. There was no simple way I've found for aligning the bits other than to test the chisel marks against the wood to see if it is aligned. It's a hit or miss exercise. Out of alignment means you're cutting a jagged mortise. If somebody does know a tip for aligning the bit to the fence, please drop us a comment and share that with our viewers. I played around with a scrap piece of plywood to check the point marks for some sort of alignment and then felt that was good enough to try my first run. I chose the 1/2-inch chisel bit and a leftover thicker block of cherry for the first test, with the goal of cutting a 2-inch long mortise, or 4 1/2-inch plunges into the cherry material. Each 1/2-inch cut required a reset of the wood against the fence and the tightening of the hold-down foot and the curved holding rods against that stock. The drill bit does its job clearing out the material, but the drill press feed handle required significant pressure to plunge that bit into the wood. All of that makes sense because you're still using the sharp edges of the bit to chisel out the corners of the hole by hand. After my 4 plunge cuts, a close-up of the finished mortise shows that my chisel was a little bit off. It's not really aligned squarely to the block, but a shouldered tenon would cover up any tiny little stair-stepped flaws like that. I also still needed to clean out the sides from some extra leftover flakes of wood that the bit didn't remove.
Clean up on aisle 3!
This was a manual chisel cleanup that I was not expecting. Cherry is a hardwood, but white ash is harder. That'll be our final test. I set up the block without a fence adjustment because I just wanted to see how much more difficult it would be, and yes, it required a bit of additional downward pressure to get this 4-sided chisel bit down into that ash. I also had some struggle getting the bit removed from the wood after the plunge cut, but ultimately the mortise bit did its job in the end. While I have been reviewing this Vevor branded tool, it's yet another example of an imported tool sold by multiple brands. It looks to be exactly like these other examples, just with a different paint job. So use your best judgment when selecting this tool. As far as ease of use and practicality, it's hard to see how much of a time saver this would be over simply drilling a straight row of holes and then hand chiseling out the waste. I think if I had a bunch of repeat mortising to do on the same thickness of wood, this tool would be much easier. For a couple of simple mortise and tenon cuts on a small project, maybe this tool is overkill. I think on smaller projects like that, even thick dowels would be easier to install. For a review, overall I thought the cost was reasonable and the tool is hefty so that it should stand the test of time. It was relatively easy to install and it did somewhat reduce the need for chisel cleanup. Not great, the need for sanding kind of bugged me in order to get this tool to mount, as did the limitation on adjusting the fence for thicker lumber without adding my plywood fix. I was disappointed in how difficult it was to square up the chisel bit to my stock for a straight mortise, but that would be true for any brand with this same design. I thought that it would still be a useful tool in my shop even with those struggles, so it gets 3.5 out of 5 thumbs. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We don't ask for memberships or donations and we don't accept sponsors. Giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel is what helps support us. Take care.